My 7-year-old daughter Lila stood at the far end of the dining room gripping a tiny gift box in her hands. Her gold dress shimmered faintly under the soft light of the chandelier, and her curls bounced slightly as she shifted from one foot to the other. All around her, laughter echoed and champagne glasses clinked. It was one of those perfectly polished holiday parties, the kind where everything looks like it came out of a home decor magazine, where everyone pretends they don't see the cracks beneath the glitter. But I saw Lila. She was staring straight at Evelyn, her grandmother, my husband Daniel's mother, with a quiet determination. Her small voice, almost swallowed by the chatter, floated across the room. "Grandma," she said, lifting the box a little, "Daddy told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." That was the moment the room froze. Forks hovered in midair. The pianist's fingers faltered. Evelyn tilted her head and gave a tight smile, half confused, half dismissing, like she was trying to figure out if it was a joke. But when she opened the box, she didn't laugh. She screamed. Not the kind of scream that seeks attention. It was the kind that slices through years of fake smiles, the kind that shatters the illusion of harmony, like glass under pressure. Everyone turned. Some rushed over. I didn't move, because I already knew what was inside. That box had lived in our closet for months. Daniel had packed it himself. He said it was for the day Evelyn goes too far. I guess we both knew that day would come. I just didn't expect it to be Christmas brunch. But let me take you back, because this wasn't about one box, one scream, or even one insult. This was a slow burn, and my daughter was the one who finally lit the match. When I married Daniel, I thought I was marrying into the kind of family I'd always dreamed of: warm, noisy, full of traditions. Evelyn, his mother, was at the heart of it all. She had this presence about her, commanding, gracious in a performative way, the type of woman who gave etiquette advice without being asked, and thought herself the keeper of family values. At first, I admired her. I tried to earn her approval. I smiled through her comments, brought over casseroles for family dinners, asked her for advice on flower arrangements and holiday menus. She'd smile back, say nice things about my cooking, hug me goodbye. For a while, it felt like we were building something. But slowly, the cracks formed. She started leaving me off family group chats. She'd make passive remarks like, "We Smiths have a certain way of doing things," followed by a pointed glance. She'd joke about how I was a little different from Daniel's ex-girlfriends, or say things like, "I guess Lila doesn't take after your side, she's so quiet." It was all subtle. Nothing I could pin down or call out without sounding overly sensitive. So I stayed quiet, smiled harder, tried to blend in. Lila was 2 when Daniel entered our lives. He never hesitated. From the moment he met her, he was present, kind, patient. When we got married, he didn't just say vows to me, he said them to her. He adopted her officially the following year. And in our home, we never used the word step. Lila was his daughter. But Evelyn never saw it that way. She pretended to at first. A card for Lila's birthday, a token gift during holidays. But over time, the difference grew too obvious to ignore. At Thanksgiving, each grandchild got a monogrammed plate with their name painted in gold. Lila's seat. A plain one from the cupboard. At Christmas, Ava got a new tablet. Max got the latest gaming headphones. Lila got a candle, a cheap one, from the clearance bin probably. I told myself she was forgetful, that maybe she didn't mean to leave Lila out. Maybe she just had too much on her plate. But kids notice. One night, after a family barbecue where the other kids got gift bags and Lila didn't, she whispered to me in the back seat, "Mom, do I not belong in Daddy's family?" I didn't know what to say. Daniel clenched the steering wheel tighter, but said nothing. That silence lasted for years. I kept showing up. I told myself it was for Lila, for memories, for family. I convinced myself that by staying quiet, I was protecting her, teaching her grace. But all I was really doing was showing her how to shrink herself to fit in. Daniel and I fought about it quietly behind closed doors. He'd nod, say he noticed, but didn't want to start something. Evelyn was still his mother. "But she's hurting your daughter," I said once. "I know," he whispered. "I'm just not sure what to do." So I did what I always did. I carried the weight, I smoothed things over, I baked cookies for family events, and bought gifts that Evelyn would probably re-gift. And I watched my daughter fold herself smaller and smaller. Then, one day, a shift. It was the way Evelyn handed Max a new phone wrapped in gold paper and called him my future CEO, then turned to Lila and handed her a lavender candle with the words, "Just didn't want you to be completely left out." Daniel's eyes darkened, his jaw set. That night after Lila went to bed, he told me about the box. "I've packed something," he said. "Something she can give Evelyn if this ever happens again." I told her it's her choice when to use it. I stared at him. "You mean you told her? You already gave it to her?" He nodded. "I needed her to know I see it too, that I won't pretend anymore." On Christmas morning, Lila got dressed like it was her birthday. She asked for her favorite dress, the one she wore when the adoption papers were signed. She curled her hair and picked her glitter headband. In the car, she held the small red box on her lap like a secret. Evelyn's house was as picture-perfect as always. Scented candles, gold ornaments, matching napkins, every detail immaculate. But under it all was the same old chill. She greeted Max and Ava with squeals and kisses. She handed Max an envelope cash, probably. Ava got earrings and a gift card to her favorite boutique. Lila got nothing. Not at first. Eventually, Evelyn called her name like it was an afterthought. "This is for you," she said, handing her a small gift bag. "Didn't want you to feel completely left out." Inside was another candle. A different scent, same cheap feel. The tag read, "To Daniel's girl." No name, no warmth. Just a reminder that she didn't belong. Daniel stared at the floor. I felt my pulse rise. Lila, without a word, stood up. She walked to Evelyn's end of the table, held out the red box, and said in a voice so calm it sliced right through the noise, "Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." The silence that followed Lila's words was dense, so thick you could almost feel it pressing against your skin. Even the fireplace crackling in the corner seemed to quiet, as if the flames themselves were listening. Evelyn blinked slowly. For a moment, she looked like she couldn't quite process what was happening. She took the red box from Lila with hesitant fingers, tilting her head like she was trying to decipher a riddle written in a language she didn't recognize. "Oh," she said lightly, trying to smile. "What's this, sweetheart? Some kind of surprise?" Lila said nothing. She turned around and calmly walked back to her seat. Daniel reached under the table and grabbed my hand. His grip was strong but trembling slightly, like every suppressed moment from the past few years had just surfaced in a single breath. I glanced at him, then at Lila. She sat perfectly still, her posture upright, her gaze steady. No fear, no shame. Only calm resolve. Evelyn turned the box over in her hands a few times before she began peeling off the red wrapping paper. She did it slowly, dramatically, as if performing for the rest of the table. There was an awkward chuckle from someone down the line, Daniel's sister, I think, but no one else moved. Everyone was watching. As the lid came off, I could see her expression shift slightly at first, and then all at once. Inside on top was a photo in a white frame. It was of Daniel sitting in a hospital chair, Lila nestled in his lap, frosting smeared across her cheeks, arms wrapped tight around his neck. She must have been 2, maybe 3. The caption underneath, written in gold script, "Day 1, Dad." I had forgotten we even had that photo printed. Evelyn paused, her eyes narrowing. Then she pulled out the envelope underneath. It was thick. She opened it carefully, and as soon as she saw the header, I saw her flinch. Adoption papers. Legal. Signed. Stamped by the court. Daniel's name printed clearly. Father. There was no mistaking it. There was no step. No asterisk. It was legal fact. It was truth. And it was right there in black and white. Then came the letter. Her hands shook as she unfolded it, and her lips moved silently as she read. Her eyes darted back and forth across the page, every line draining the color from her face. I looked at Daniel. He was staring straight ahead, still holding my hand, jaw tight, not blinking. Then Evelyn stopped reading. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Finally, she said it low, bitter. "I can't believe you'd embarrass me like this." She stood so suddenly that her chair scraped loudly across the floor. The noise made Ava flinch, and Max stop mid-bite cookie crumbs falling into his lap. Daniel's sister reached out instinctively to steady the table, but Evelyn was already backing away. Her hands were shaking now. Daniel stood slowly. His voice was level, but there was steel beneath it. "We didn't embarrass you," he said. "You did that all by yourself." Evelyn's finger flew out, aimed right at me. "This is her doing," she hissed. "She turned you against me. She poisoned you." I rose to my feet, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "No," I said. "Lila gave you a gift. She gave you a chance to see her, to really see her, and you chose not to." No one said a word. All you could hear was the fire popping behind us and the sound of Evelyn's breath, shallow and uneven, like she had just run a mile in heels. Lila stayed seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't crying, she wasn't scared, she was just watching, witnessing. Daniel looked at her and held out his hand. "Ready to go?" he asked. She nodded. I grabbed our coats, helped Lila into hers, and picked up the plate of untouched cookies we had brought. No one stopped us. No one said goodbye. Not even Evelyn. We walked out the front door and stepped into the snow-covered silence of the driveway. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt peace. That night, we didn't talk about what happened right away. Lila curled up in her pajamas with a book and asked for hot cocoa. Daniel put on a Christmas movie, but none of us were really watching it. We just sat together. There were no tears, no regrets, just the warm stillness that follows a storm. When I tucked Lila into bed, she hugged me tighter than usual. "Mom," she whispered, "was Grandma mad at me?" Before I could answer, Daniel stepped into the doorway. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "Grandma just forgot something important." Lila frowned, but I think she remembered it today. Then she turned over and went to sleep. The days that followed were quiet. There were no phone calls from Evelyn, no angry texts, no guilt trips. Daniel's sister sent a brief message saying, "I don't know what to say, but I'm sorry," and left it at that. No one else reached out, but the quiet wasn't empty. It was full of breath of space of the things we'd been too afraid to claim before. Daniel changed too. I saw it in the little things, the way he looked at Lila, the way he answered her questions more carefully, like he wanted her to know that her voice mattered. One afternoon, I walked past Lila's room and found them building a blanket fort. She was giggling, and he was letting her paint his face with glitter. And I realized this was what family should feel like. I kept the letter, the one Evelyn had read. I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside Lila's baby shoes and the hospital bracelet from the day she was born. Not because I wanted to remember the pain, but because I wanted to remember the moment Lila found her voice. She's only 7, but that day she taught me more about courage than most adults ever do. And if there's one thing I'll never forget, it's this: children don't need perfection. They don't need endless gifts or fancy parties. They need to feel seen. They need to know that when they speak, someone listens, that when they stand up, they won't be alone. That day, Lila stood up, and we stood with her. The first Sunday after Christmas came and went like a sigh. No invitations, no group texts, no mandatory brunches with perfectly folded napkins and tension thick enough to slice. Evelyn didn't call, and none of the extended family reached out, not even to pretend everything was normal. And strangely, we were okay with that. Lila spent the morning coloring snowflakes on construction paper. She asked if we could have pancakes in our pajamas, and so we did. Daniel added chocolate chips to the batter and shaped them like snowmen. I played Christmas songs on the Bluetooth speaker, but instead of classics from Evelyn's curated playlist, we let Lila choose. She picked silly ones, off-key children's choirs, and pop covers. And we danced in the kitchen like the world outside didn't exist. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't Instagram-worthy, but it was ours. And it was real. Later that day, while Lila was building a Lego castle in the living room, Daniel pulled me aside. His voice was softer than I'd heard in a long time. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner," he said, staring at the mug in his hands. "I should have spoken up years ago." I nodded. I didn't need an apology. I needed this awareness, this presence. "You did say something," I said quietly. "You just didn't use words." He looked up at me. That letter you wrote. It gave her something she never had before. A line. He took a deep breath. I didn't know if it would change anything, but I needed Lila to know I chose her, that I always will. I reached over and placed my hand on his. She knows, I said. She knew the moment you let her carry that truth herself. There's something strange about letting go of people who are supposed to be family. It feels like grief, but not the kind that comes from death. It's the kind that comes from realization. That moment when you understand someone doesn't see you the way you hoped they did, that they never did. And yet, in the weeks that followed, there was something freeing about the silence. We stopped walking on eggshells. We stopped explaining, defending, justifying. Instead, we started building new rhythms, simpler ones, more honest ones. We made our own family night traditions, board games with no competition, movie nights where Lila got to pick even if it meant watching the same animated film for the 10th time. We stopped measuring our holidays by how expensive the gifts were and started measuring them by how much laughter echoed through our walls. And every now and then when Lila asked small questions, do you think Grandma will ever change, or was I bad before we answered with open hearts, not perfect words? No, sweetheart, I told her once, brushing her curls behind her ear. You were never the problem. Some people love in pieces, but that's not your fault. She looked up at me and nodded slowly, as if letting the truth soak in. One evening, a month or so later, Lila came home from school and headed straight for her room. I followed, sensing the heaviness in her steps. I found her sitting cross-legged on the rug, flipping through a scrapbook she had started when she was 5. Most of it was stickers and glitter glue, but tucked between the pages were photos, some from holidays with Evelyn, some from that brunch day. She looked up at me. Can I take this page out? She asked, pointing to a photo of her and Evelyn, one where they were decorating cookies. Lila's smile was wide in the photo, but now it looked like a lie. You don't have to erase anything, I said gently, but if it doesn't feel like it belongs anymore, you're allowed to let it go. She stared at the photo for a while, then carefully tore it out, not with anger, but with peace. She set it aside and closed the book. Then she reached for her box of colored pencils and started drawing. I watched her sketch a small house with 3 figures holding hands in front of it. A woman, a man, and a girl with curly hair. She added a sun in this corner and a little heart above the roof. No grandmother, no confusion, just her version of home. Daniel came home late that night, and when I told him about the drawing, he just stood in the doorway for a while staring at the fridge where we'd taped it up. Do you think she's okay? He asked softly. She's better than okay, I replied. She's healing, and so were we. Chatte. I wish I could tell you that Evelyn came around, that she apologized, that she showed up at our doorstep with tears and a change of heart, but she didn't. What came instead was a letter, folded neatly in an envelope, no return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. I opened it slowly, my heart tight with the possibility of remorse, but it wasn't an apology. It was a defense. A page of "You misunderstood, and I never meant to hurt her, and you've always been too sensitive." There was no mention of the adoption papers, no mention of Lila, only a vague, "Hope you're doing well." I read it twice. Then I set it down and lit a match. The paper burned quickly, curling in on itself like it knew it had no place here. Daniel watched from the doorway. She's still pretending, he said. Yes, I replied, but we're not. Lila never asked if Evelyn wrote back. Maybe she didn't care. Or maybe she just knew that some goodbyes don't need to be spoken. They happen the moment we stop begging for love that has conditions. That winter, our little family grew stronger, not in number, but in bond. We stopped going to gatherings where we weren't welcome. We stopped sending obligatory gifts to people who couldn't even say her name. We started choosing ourselves. And in that space, something beautiful began to grow. Time moved on in small ways, grocery lists, school pickups, forgotten socks in the dryer. But something had shifted. The silence around us wasn't the same as before. It wasn't avoidance or shame or discomfort. It was peace. Real peace. The kind you don't recognize at first because it's not loud. It doesn't throw itself into your arms or post about itself on Facebook. It just sits beside you patiently until one day you realize you've stopped flinching every time your phone buzzes. Lila started humming again. At night, I'd hear her singing to her stuffed animals the off-key melody of a made-up song about a bunny and a moon. And in the morning, she'd ask questions again. Big ones. Not about Evelyn, but about the stars and whales and whether trees could feel lonely. She had stopped asking why she didn't get the same presents. She no longer waited at the mailbox after holidays. And during one particularly snowy Saturday, she turned to Daniel and said, "Do you think I'll be a mom like you someday?" He smiled. "Like me?" "Yeah," she nodded. "The kind that stays." Daniel didn't answer right away. He just wrapped his arms around her and held her close. No lecture. No long explanation. Just presence. Just love. That was enough. Chatsa. But the world outside our little house didn't stop turning. Family members began whispering. Not to our faces, of course, never directly, but through cousins, through accidental social media posts, through the silence of invitations that never came. Daniel's sister, to her credit, texted a few times. Tentative things. Half efforts. "Are you sure you don't want to come to Grandpa's birthday lunch?" "It won't be a big deal." Or "Mom says she's trying. She just doesn't know how." Or the one that made me laugh out loud. "Can't you just come and keep the peace?" The peace. That phrase haunted me for years. I used to think peace meant pretending, smiling through gritted teeth, letting my daughter be ignored for the sake of harmony. But that's not peace. That's submission dressed up in polite clothing. So I stopped replying. Daniel did too. We didn't fight the whispers. We didn't post a dramatic explanation online. We just chose something else. We chose silence with dignity over noise without love. One afternoon, Lila came home with a drawing. It was of 3 hearts, one big one, medium, one small, all floating in the sky with wings. Above them, she'd written in pink crayon, "Chosen love is real love." I nearly cried right there on the kitchen floor. "Where did you hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged. "I just thought it. Because Dad picked me right? Like on purpose." "Yes," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "He picked you. Always." She looked so certain, so clear in her own place, like the weight of that one truth you were chosen was enough to carry her through every storm that might come. And I realized maybe it was. Sometimes I wondered what Evelyn was telling people. That we were ungrateful, that we turned her grandson against her, that I manipulated Daniel and poisoned her perfect family from within. It didn't really matter anymore, because while she clung to her story, we were writing a better one. Ours didn't need grand gestures or golden gifts. It needed pancakes on weekends, matching socks that never quite matched, a dad who learned how to braid curly hair, and a mom who no longer said it's okay when it wasn't. It needed truth, and every day Lila woke up inside a home that gave her just that. One Sunday, Daniel's Aunt Evelyn's older sister showed up at our door, unannounced. I nearly didn't open it, but something in her eyes made me pause. She looked tired, not physically, emotionally, like someone who'd been carrying someone else's version of the truth for too long. "I just want to talk," she said. I let her in. She sat at our kitchen table, folded her hands, and exhaled deeply. "I know we haven't been close," she started, "but I saw what happened. Not just at Christmas, all of it. I stayed quiet. Let her keep going. I tried to tell your mother-in-law for years, tried to get her to see that her way wasn't always the right way. But she doesn't listen. Not to me. Not to anyone." She paused, then added, "But what your daughter did, that was brave. And what Daniel wrote, that was the truth." My throat tightened. "She told everyone you humiliated her," she continued, "said you all ambushed her to make a point." I bit my lip. "Do you believe that I asked?" She shook her head. "No, I think you finally gave her a mirror, and she didn't like what she saw." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. I don't know if this means anything, but I found this tucked in one of Evelyn's old journals. I think it's from the day Daniel adopted Lila. I took the envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a photo. It was the same day as the one in the red box Daniel holding Lila after the adoption hearing. But this one was a candid shot taken from behind. Lila's arms wrapped tightly around his neck, Daniel's head bowed to her shoulder. There was no caption, just the moment. I closed the envelope. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "I won't pretend I know how to fix everything. But I see what you're doing, and I respect it." Then she stood and let herself out. That night, I showed Daniel the photo. He stared at it for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "We didn't need her to change. We just needed her to stop pretending she hadn't hurt us." I nodded. "And now that we've stopped pretending too, we finally have room to heal." We're not perfect. We still get things wrong. There are days when Lila asks about the cousins she used to play with, days when she wonders why people who once loved her forgot how to show it. And we don't have all the answers. But we do have this. We see her, we hear her, and every time she wonders if she's enough, we remind her you were chosen. On purpose. Not as a compromise, not as a consolation, as a daughter, a whole daughter, forever. Spring came early that year. Maybe not on the calendar, but in our home. The air felt different, warmer somehow, lighter. Lila had stopped glancing at the mailbox after school. She no longer asked about the next family gathering or whether Evelyn would come to her spring recital. She stopped waiting. She had moved on. And in that space, joy crept in. Not the loud, glittery kind of joy you see in commercials. Not the carefully curated moments for social media. But the kind that shows up in the small things. The giggle during breakfast, the shared glance between two people who finally understand each other, the quiet evenings that feel like enough. Daniel started leaving handwritten notes in Lila's lunchbox. Silly drawings, knock-knock jokes, sometimes just a doodle of her and him with big, goofy smiles. One day she came home beaming. "Dad said I'm his sunshine," she told me, holding up a napkin covered in yellow marker. "He said even on bad days I'm his favorite kind of light." I didn't cry. I waited until she went to her room and then cried into the dish towel. Because I remembered the years when we fought for her to feel included. And now, she didn't just feel loved, she knew she was. We created new traditions that spring. Not to replace the old ones, but to write our own. Easter egg hunts in our backyard, even if it was muddy. Fancy Friday dinners, where we dressed up and drank apple juice from wine glasses. Lila even hosted her first Mom and Dad Appreciation Day, complete with glitter trophies she made from toilet paper rolls and foil. She gave me one that read, "Best Cuddler in the Galaxy." Daniels said, "Official Daddy of the Year forever and ever." It was silly, it was beautiful, it was healing. That's it. Near the end of April, Lila's school hosted a special project called Family Roots. Each child had to make a family tree and present it in front of their class. I held my breath when the assignment came home. Family trees can be hard when your branches don't look like everyone else's, when some roots are broken, when love isn't tied to blood. But Lila didn't flinch. She pulled out her colored markers, a roll of brown paper, and got to work. No hesitation. At the top of the paper, she wrote in big pink letters, "My real family." And beneath that, she drew us. 3 big hearts with names in capital letters, Lila. Daniel, Maya. No one else. Not Evelyn, not cousins. Just the people who showed up. And then she added something else in a small speech bubble coming from her own heart. Chosen is stronger than born. Presentation day came. Daniel took off work early. I cleared my schedule. We both sat in those 2 small elementary chairs, knees squished, surrounded by juice boxes, and parents trying not to check their emails. When Lila stood up, I could feel the entire room still. She didn't read nervously from a paper. She didn't shift side to side. She just spoke. "This is my family tree," she said proudly. "It's small, but it's real." She pointed to the hearts. "That's me. That's my mom. That's my dad. He adopted me when I was 2. And I adopted him too because love goes both ways." Some parents smiled politely, others blinked quickly like something had gotten in their eyes. Lila ended with a sentence that still sits in my bones. "My family isn't big, but it's strong. Because we love loud and we see each other even when it's hard." Applause erupted, but I didn't clap. I just held my hands to my mouth and let the tears fall. On the way home, we stopped for ice cream. Daniel let her get extra sprinkles. She wore her heart-shaped sunglasses and declared it the best day ever. And when we got home, as she changed into pajamas, she looked up at me with her serious face, the one she reserves for deep thoughts. "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Are you glad Grandma ignored me that day?" I blinked. It was a question only a child could ask, honest and piercing. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair away from her forehead. "I'm never glad someone hurt you," I said, "but I'm glad you knew how to stand up for yourself. I'm proud of you." So proud I could burst. She smiled a little shyly. "I think I'm proud of me too." We keep the red box in a drawer now, not out of bitterness, not as a monument to pain, but as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can give a child isn't protection. It's permission. Permission to speak, to choose, to believe they are enough, to stop shrinking to fit into someone else's story and instead write their own. Evelyn hasn't come back, and we haven't gone looking. There's no final confrontation, no last dramatic phone call, just quiet distance. And that's okay, because not every story needs a villain to end with justice. Sometimes the real triumph is simply leaving, choosing better. Lila did that, so did we. And in doing so, we learned a truth bigger than any family tree. Love that is chosen, shown and steady, is love that never has to be earned.